Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find the tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
She's back.
I'm back. Hi, Jimmy.
I missed you, Granny.
I know. I could tell.
I mean, I was trying to celebrate without you, but life was just knocking me down, so I had a little depressing episode last week.
Poor guy. I know. That's sad. You needed your mama.
I did.
I'm here. I'm back.
So she's back.
Yeah.
We want to start and begin by thanking our patrons who support this podcast. Without you, it would not be possible. So thank you to our patrons.
I want to double that thank you so much. That is not just a financial contribution that you make, but also a big encouragement to the two of us to let us know that what we are doing matters and that you care enough to make that kind of a sacrifice each month. So thank you so very much.
Absolutely. And we got a little bit of an upgrade, a little bit of an equipment upgrade, or a lot of an equipment upgrade. Right. We got a new camera.
Yes.
We began with just an entry-level camera. It was good. It was decent, but this one, the image quality is much, much better. And the other one didn't have issues, but it's complicated. It was a rigged setup that got us by.
It did.
But because of the generosity of our patrons, we were able to upgrade. So that's always exciting when that happens.
And our plan is to make good use of that. After the first of the year, Jimmy and I will begin creating those videos that we talked about. I think we talked about it here. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So today's episode, where are they now? We're talking about sex offenders who've been busted. What are they up to? Where are they at? Why do we make such a big deal about sex offenders? If anybody knows me, they know that I am not a fan of churches hiding the status of sex offenders, giving sex offenders anonymity within the churches, saying that they're quote unquote keeping an eye on them. And then intentionally withholding that information from the congregation. I think that's absolutely dishonest. It's sinful. It's slimy. It's shameful. It's gross. Am I missing anything? Am I missing any words?
I'm going to say, boy, you were rolling along there. No, it's true. It's actually a lie.
It really is.
It is a lie.
When you circumvent the sex offender registry and intentionally go out of your way to hide that from your church, you are lying.
It is a lie. So,
and I wrote a post about that. Did you ever see Matilda?
Yes, I love that, by the way.
When he brings his kids into the shop and he has this old hunk of junk there and he's like, super gluing the bumper on and he's dumping sawdust in the transmission to... he said, this will make it sound sweet as a nut. And his daughter, Matilda, is like, Daddy, you're a crook. He said, no, he's like, this is how you sell a car.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's getting on her because she's being too honest. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a blog post about that and used that analogy before. And I was like, this is exactly what churches are doing when they try to hide these sex offenders. Yeah. And what they do is they turn around, they come back at me, kind of with both guns ablazing, and they say, well, don't you believe in grace? Don't you believe in mercy? Well, yeah, when people deserve it, when people have earned it, when people have worked to right the wrongs that they did, which is what repentance is. Absolutely, I believe in mercy and I believe in grace. But the superficial handing grace over to people when people have done absolutely nothing to change their behavior, and they're still lying and cheating and stealing and oppressing people. When you give those people protection at the expense of victims, That's just counter.
Now, there are going to be a lot of people
that's-
that get up in arms saying, well, who are you to say that a person that comes into the church, say it's someone who is going to be the new preacher who has a history of sex abuse, who are you to say that they haven't repented?
Yeah. I think it's pretty obvious, and I think there's so many scriptures that talk about bearing fruit in keeping with your repentance. You will know them by their fruits. Jesus says that over and over again. You will know them by their fruits. What kind of fruit do people produce? And, we've talked a lot about this, and I don't want to get down that rabbit trail, but, that's not self-righteousness. That's vigilance. And there's quite a big difference between the two. Being self-righteous is when you feel like you're the only person who has it right.
I think also, Jimmy, we forget sometimes that we do not have factual data to back up the fact that sex abusers do change. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, that's right.
We have hard, concrete data that proves they do not, for the most part, change at all, that behavior continues. So based on that alone, there is a responsibility to tell others, that this person is who they are.
And you're not warning others based on rumor. You're warning them based on
fact. Yes.
And based on consistent predatory behavior.
Right.
It's not a one-time incident. It's not something that they just messed up and had a miscalculation, a misjudgment.
Right.
They are serial offenders. All of them are.
Right. And I think too often, unless we have been personally touched, either by having a member of a family or someone we love been touched by a sexual abuser, or unless we personally have been abused, we don't totally get it, the pain that is caused to a person. Yeah. And so we're not talking just it's a one-time incident that, big deal, that person can, they can get a couple sessions of counseling and get over it. It doesn't always happen that way. In fact, very rarely does it. So we're talking damage that is such painful hurt.
Yeah.
And lingering after effects.
Yep. So, the effects are never ending.
No.
So Mom kind of had this idea to talk about some high-profile sex offenders and kind of, where they are, what are they up to. They were on our radar for a while, and we've kind of forgotten about them. So we're just going to go through. We'll start with Bill Cosby here in the grand state of Pennsylvania. Bill Cosby, he was a staple growing up for a lot of us. We absolutely love. I mean, even my generation.
Well, I loved all the reruns. I kept watching them. They're awesome.
I loved. I grew up on Bill Cosby.
His comedy was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Bill Cosby, I think that surprised a lot of people when they found out that he was raping all these women, drugging and raping them for years. Once Bill got arrested, you saw the true side of Bill came out, where he was defiant. He was, he was barking at the people doing the interviews, the media. Like he
wasn't
was
this
an absolute
gentle,
jerk.
kind person at all.
Guy was a jerk.
Changed his whole demeanor. It changed the whole. When you look at him, you see him with different eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whole different person.
Just arrogant, prideful.
Right.
So where is he now? Well, he's in state prison. He's 83 years old. He's in state prison. He's going to die in prison over in eastern Pennsylvania. He was actually supposed to come to Somerset, where we are now. He was supposed to go to Laurel Highlands, SCI Laurel Highlands, because that was the only prison with a health word on it in the state of Pennsylvania. But they built that new prison, and they just opened it up right before Cosby's sentencing. So they, at the last minute, they decided to keep him there. So he is in Eastern Pennsylvania. I forget the name of the prison. But Bill Cosby, we're going to look up his article here. These all come from Wikipedia. But the entry for Bill Cosby. William Henry Cosby Jr., born July 12, 1937, is an American stand-up comedian, actor, author, and convicted sex offender. Very first sentence. And I like that the first sentence draws attention to that because that's who he is.
Right. Yes.
That wasn't buried somewhere down in the middle of this article. It wasn't, stand-up comedian, author, actor, here was his early life, and then, on and on and on until you get to the little subsection where he's a sex offender. It's the very first sentence because that's who he is.
As we progress in this and look at the different people, it's enlightening, and it is pretty clear that Wikipedia tells it like it is. It's who these people are. Mm-hmm. And when we think of that in light of how we introduce people, we don't always introduce them that way. Mm-mm. We just tell the kind of the good things, and we don't say anything else. We leave off part of it. And that's what you're talking about. Like in church, within churches, we'll introduce brother or sister so-and-so who's been leading, singing, and pastoring a church for the past 23 years, and we leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say we leave it at that, especially with sex offenders in the church.
It's intentional.
Because I've seen them
it's
go so far out of their way to not only fail to mention that they're sex offenders, but to just really build them up.
Yeah.
Is there somebody significant?
Well,
They're
a graduate from
Freed-Hardeman
Freed-Hardeman University, college, pastored in the church for blah, 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 blah years. But what's omitted is served 3 years as a sex offender in such and such prison. But
so Cosby, you watched this. You watched this documentary on Cosby. I did not.
I did.
Is he in segregated community or is he in the general population?
He's in general.
That's surprising to me, given his
It was
fame.
Interesting for me. They interviewed his cellmate that got released, and the cellmate was saying how Cosby has never had yet a family visitor, his wife or any of his children, by Cosby's request. And I thought this is interesting because he never wants them to see him in that environment, behind bars like that. And this cellmate that was talking, he said, man, it's just going to be awful, for when the holidays come. And he said, we live for that relative to come and to give them a hug and, to be, and Mr. Cosby won't have that. And I thought, well, is that his arrogant pride? That and then when the commentators spoke and summarized this, they said, well, basically what Cosby is saying is, if I let them come visit me and all that, he said, I'm pretty much saying I did it. I'm guilty, and he's not going to do that. So he's being bullheaded, and he's saying, no, I don't want any visitors. I don't want them to see me like this because I don't deserve to be here. So still, he well,
that was the first thought that came to my head. Is that
he says, I don't deserve to be there. Yeah. So he'll go without any visitors just to prove. Yep. And I thought, well, be lonely then, mister.
Yeah. I don't think he's got that lonely, though. I'm sure he has all kinds of friends in prison.
Yeah.
Because that's how...
Well, this guy adored him. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just how they... Especially the older sex offenders in prison.
Right.
They're oftentimes treated really well. How about Larry Nassar? What's the entry for him? Lawrence Gerard Nassar, born August 16, 1963, is an American convicted serial rapist and sex offender. Former USA Gymnastics national team doctor, former osteopathic physician, and former professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. I like that the first thing they say, he is an American convicted serial rapist and sex offender.
Even before...
Because what
That's
he
who
is.
he
That's
is.
correct.
All the other stuff falls by the wayside, pales in comparison to who he is.
Mm-hmm.
They don't list all those big international and national.
He was a world-renowned doctor.
Right, world-renowned.
And the very first thing he is
Mhm.
what did it say? He is an American convicted serial rapist and sex offender.
Yes.
Yep, that's right. That's what he is.
Yes, that's who he is.
That's it. I mean, they nailed it. How about Jerry Sandusky here in Somerset? He is at SCI Laurel Highlands here in Somerset.
He's
just
our
3
neighbor.
miles up the road.
Yeah.
Sandusky. Gerald Arthur Sandusky, born January 26, 1944, is an American retired college football coach who was convicted of rape and child sexual abuse. Yep, because that's who he is.
That's who he is.
Very first sentence. That is correct. That is a correct introduction.
It blows me away that Wikipedia, who could have not written it like this, is very truthful and upfront and just describes it. Hey, here's who
that's who they are.
Who they are. That's who they are.
Yeah.
So
how about Subway Boy, Jared Fogle? You remember Jared Fogle?
I do.
He was a guy who everybody loved.
Yeah.
They all adored.
Well, I smile thinking
Jared
about him
Fogle.
because I did. I thought he was pretty awesome. Loved his commercials.
Everybody loved him.
Yeah.
He was the guy that he would always have his pair of pants in every picture.
Yeah.
Every Subway commercial. Yeah. He would have his big pair of
there were
pants.
billboards with him. I would drive to Johnstown to see the billboards with him on it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, by the way, all the previous people we mentioned, Cosby, Nassar, Sandusky, they're all going to die in prison. They got very lengthy sentences. Jared Fogle will not die in prison unless he gets killed in prison. But his sentence was, I think, 15 to 18 years in federal prison, but he must serve 13 before he's eligible for any kind of parole or probation. So Fogle's entry, let's look at that. Jared Scott Fogle, born August 23, 1977, is an American former spokesperson for Subway restaurants and convicted sex offender. Nailed it. That is correct.
It's who they are. It is. There's no getting around it.
Fogle did this for years and years and years, soliciting little 12 and 13-year-old girls online for sex.
Right.
I think several of them he actually met with, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a few years. That was 2015. But that was the reason he's in federal prison is he was doing the soliciting online, so that's federal jurisdiction, crossing state lines. So that's Jared Fogle.
We all want a title, and
that's not the one we want.
No, we all want to wear a title of some sort. Even if it's world's best mom. We want to have some kind of a title, or Somerset's best dad, or my best dad, whatever. But to have a title like that as part of your name, I can't imagine anything worse. I really can't.
I think some people might be thinking, well, isn't that unfair? And I get asked that question by church leaders, especially. Well, isn't that unfair to label somebody for what they did in the past? My answer is no, because again, this is who they are. This was not a 1-time or 2-time or 3-time or 4-time or even 100-time thing. These guys did it over and over and over serially for all of their adult life. It's who they are.
And it's an intentional who they are.
It's not falling into sin or falling into temptation.
It's extremely intentional,
and
plotted
calculated.
Out, thought out. Yes, calculated, focused. That's who they are. And I think we need to really, really get that through our heads. Wikipedia did. They get it.
Yeah, they got it right.
They get it. They got it right. Yeah. Yes.
Weinstein, who had allegations clear back in the 1970s. He had allegations of rape
Right,
and sexual
right.
abuse. They
Kind
got
of
it
like
right.
how they said a former film producer and
And
yeah,
a
this is
current,
who,
parentheses, a current convicted
right.
sex offender. Yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
I
Right.
think most of these other ones did the same thing. He is
Yeah.
an American former spokesperson for
Right.
Subway restaurants and convicted, currently
I
convicted.
love how
sex offender.
Nassar was done because
Sandusky.
they put his first and then all those other accolades that he had previously.
Yeah, here it is. He is an American convicted serial rapist and sex offender. They could have just put a period there.
Right. But then former and they did.
And that's that's not meant to be an insult.
No.
That's who
they are. Right. Right.
And I think when we have sex offenders come into our churches and they want to hide behind anonymity and hide within the confines of our churches, I think one of the best things that we can do is we can introduce them as who they are and say, all right, fine. You want to be here? Let us introduce you to the church. This is Jeffrey Smith, who is a convicted serial child rapist. And, if you want to give other credentials, and he used to lead singing when he was at a church. He used to preach. He used to do whatever.
Right.
But I think we should introduce them for who they are.
Do you think, Jimmy, in some way that may actually help even that person to be more aware that others are aware? In other words, it in some way possibly lead to repentance at some point?
I don't know about that. I'm highly, highly, highly skeptical of any kind of genuine repentance with especially child sexual predators. Because I don't think they want to change. I don't think they can change because they don't want to change. And that's, there's a lot of theology
And I know
behind that
we've done sessions on that about,
But do I think that it would help them to hold them accountable? Absolutely. And I think, this is not to be mean-spirited and to rub it in their face or anything like. This is to point out to people who they are. To say, you have worked very hard to receive this identity.
Yes. Okay.
This wasn't
and
a mistake. It wasn't an accident.
I appreciate the word identity that you've used because that is who they are. Yeah. That identifies that person. As a parent, believe me, I need to know who the sex offenders are.
Yeah. But this is it's kind of a it's kind of an ironic question because ultimately what I believe, and I'm very open about this, is that serial sex offenders don't belong in church at all.
Correct.
Because they're wolves. And you don't invite wolves into the sheep pen.
Right.
So, just this whole premise that we're going to let them in, but we're going to label them and tell people who they are, is still giving them an upper hand. It's still allowing them into the sheep pen.
Right.
Because they're going to use that somehow. That's what they do. They take things. Bill Cosby, he uses his prison sentence and even manipulates that.
That's exactly what I thought.
There feel sorry for him.
Yes, and I thought there is this cellmate too feeling. He got kind of just teary-eyed saying, Bill's going to be so lonely, all of that because he's got to prove that he is not guilty. And I thought, you're arrogant, Bill. You will not. Yeah. You will not admit what you did.
So this is the way that I see this playing out. If churches rightfully label sex offenders for who they are, which is not what the church did, by the way. That's what the government did. because they pose a risk.
Right.
That's why the sex offender registry exists in the beginning, in the first place, because these people do pose a risk, a great risk. And so they must be on the sex offender registry according to law.
Right.
Not because they want to just
embarrass, pick on,
put up a billboard
or
and
whatever.
and pick on them. It's because they pose a risk. That's why we have sex offender registries. So as long as they're on the registry, they pose a risk. Even after they're off the registry, they pose a risk because they did it. They followed through with it. They planned it. So it's not the churches who are labeling them as sex offenders. It's first and foremost the sex offender who labels themselves a sex offender.
I think that out of everything that has been said so far, that is probably the most critical sentence for people to grasp.
Yeah, they did it. They did it.
They
planned it out. They were
themselves.
meticulous with it.
They labeled themselves. We all do. Who we are. We all put that title on ourselves, whoever we are. It's by our actions, not by anybody else's actions.
That's right.
So I think if people could only grasp that one thing, there'd be a lot less confusion about why are you calling that person a sex offender? Because that's who that person is. They gave themselves that title. They
did it when they raped
They did that,
kids.
yes. Yeah, exactly. By intentional...
Or adults. Some of these are adult serial rapists, Bill Cosby.
By your intentional actions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the way I see this playing out at churches, even for churches who allow them in and go to that measure to say, okay, here's so-and-so is on the sex offender registry, do I think that'll hold them accountable? Possibly, maybe. But here's the way that I see that play out, is that they're going to use that and say, see, I came to this church that... I looked you up on the website and I found you because of your position on grace and mercy, that you profess to be Christians who believe in forgiveness and who believe in mercy and grace. And then I came in and all of a sudden I'm the target of the church, and you guys are putting my information everywhere. Don't you know what risk that puts me at? That's the thing that Dad writes me in letters whenever I speak. Anytime that I speak or I'm interviewed by the media, he'll write me immediately and be like, don't you know what risk this puts me at? Every time you say my name or every time you speak up, that puts me at great risk, as if he's the victim.
Right. Yeah.
So they will use
always about me.
To their advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything to their advantage.
Exactly.
So,
and I keep thinking we would never put a child in a group knowing that there was a dangerous animal among them. We wouldn't, even though that animal is so-called tamed, we would not do that, because there's always that chance that tamed animal will act according to what it is.
Well, I mean, think of another analogy, and I think maybe this is even a little bit closer, but think there's the term friendly fire, right? In warfare, there's a term called friendly fire. Imagine that there's a general. There's a general who knows that there's a minefield and that there are buried landmines in this minefield, and they're in enemy territory, and one of his troops happens to cross over and get into the vicinity of that landmine or that minefield. Is it a loving thing for that general to just remain silent and be like,
not. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
These mines are here and none of them have detonated and they're kind of minding their own business and we're just going to leave it that way. Would that be the loving thing to do, or would the loving thing to do be to say, there are landmines all over the place. You need to get out.
Danger.
Yeah, yes. You need to get out of there.
Get out. Yes, we would scream.
And then that general would also point out where he knew each individual landmine was and say, stay away from this area. There is a landmine under, there's one right here. X marks the spot. Right here's a landmine.
And I'll go back to saying it again. I think the majority of people don't get how dangerous a sex offender is. The amount of injury and hurt and lingering pain and after effects that can be, that is done to a person.
And the lengths that they go to produce their victims.
Yes.
I mean, they're unstoppable.
When I think about intentional pain, I shake. I really do inside, because what kind of a heart would take, we'll say a child at this point, and cause intentional pain to a child who's innocent?
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be the most evil of evil hearts.
Yeah.
When I read about children being raped, when I know children who have been raped, my heart is sick thinking that a person could be that evil to intentionally carry out those actions and then just walk on like it's nothing.
I think that's it. That's the point that I make over and over when I go places. It's not that the people think about doing it to these children. They did it.
They did it.
They followed through with it.
They did it.
They actually detonated themselves on this child.
Right.
They did it. They
that's
followed
evil
through.
in the most horrific form.
Yeah.
So, we need to be warned.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave you with this truth bomb, and it's actually very simple. If we were to boil this down, everything that we talked about in this episode, it's this. Regardless of who you are, our actions will tell people who we are. And that's it.
Absolutely. That's it.
Good, bad, or in between, our actions will tell people who we are. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode, and we will catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.